So hello everyone. We continue with our Prospero registration for a systematic review. And so I go back to the Prospero file. The example I was using for this demonstration, we stopped at number 15 last time, and perhaps I need to recap on number 15 because this is the most important item you need to define, and it needs to be written in a very meticulous way because this actually defines the question of your review. And for that, for the most basic, for reviews about intervention, we use a PICO format. A PICO format, in a PICO format, if you want to construct a question, it's a very good idea to start with your population. So, in this particular example, we wanted to make a review, a systematic review about current treatments that are quite novel for patients with primary pulmonary hypertension because it's a disease that's difficult to treat, the prognosis is not very good, and so many novel therapies were being investigated at that time. So we start off with the population and we say in patients with primary arterial or pulmonary arterial hypertension, in patients with pulmonary arterial hypertension, another name is primary pulmonary hypertension. So this is our population. So in these patients, how is the effectiveness or efficacy of the so and so and so and so interventions, which are the novel therapies that we are going to name? Let's say rho kinase inhibitors, let's say estrogen receptor modifiers, metformin was also on the list. So, what is the effectiveness or efficacy? And perhaps in a later session, I'm going to say the difference between effectiveness and efficacy. So, what is the effectiveness or efficacy of these novel therapies as compared to the standard of care, okay, or as compared to placebo? And for efficacy or effectiveness, we might as well define a special effect or a special outcome, like for example, the effect on mortality. So you have the liberty to spell out your outcome, primary outcome in your review question, or you can simply say effectiveness or efficacy or safety. Okay, so you can put a general term and you can put a term that is very specific. However, even if you put a general term in your initial review question, you need to specify that when you are talking about the intervention, when you are specifically describing the intervention that is going to judge eligibility of selecting the studies in the review. Okay, so here, number 16, it's requiring us to list the databases and the sources where we are going to search. And because systematic review is about comprehensive searching, I advise you to write everything here. You start off, of course, by the bibliographic databases or electronic bibliographic databases like PubMed, like Cochrane Library, let's say the Scopus, like the Embase, like the Web of Science. Try to put as many databases as you can, but make sure you truly have access to these databases because you need to stick to your protocol. Don't stop just at the databases. You see here listed clinicaltrials.gov. Clinicaltrials.gov is a register for ongoing clinical trials. So you may put again one or more registers. You might also say that you are going to contact experts, that you are going to do hand searching, you're going to search reference lists, you're going to contact companies that are manufacturing certain drugs or certain devices that might be included or might be the subject of your review. So try to be as comprehensive as possible here because this helps you out when you are writing your methods section later on. But again, when you write something, you need to stick to it and you need to do it. Then it tells you here in number 17 to put a URL for your search strategy. And it's not really a mandatory field, so you might leave it out. However, it's again very good if you have a strategy to put the link to that here. Some people might think that this is the link to your search on the PubMed, or it's the link to your search on Google Scholar or on your Scopus. No, that's not right, because if you put the URL of your actual search, it's as if you are providing your results to everyone. This shouldn't be the case. They are talking here about a URL that leads to a file, let's say a Google document or some file where you keep your search strategy. This is what they mean here. Now, number 18, the condition or domain being studied. And here we have listed that the condition is pulmonary arterial hypertension. Pulmonary arterial hypertension. And you can see me here, I'm requesting from my team to be more specific, like mentioning how the definition, the disease definition, how do you diagnose it? What says or what makes us label someone with a diagnosis of a pulmonary arterial hypertension. So here, when you're talking about definition of the condition, definition of the population, definition of your intervention, you need to be very specific, or as specific as you can. You need to provide some level of detail. Participants or population. Now, remember that those participants are participants recruited by your studies, by the studies that need to be included in the review. So you are, as if you are saying, I am going to include studies that include participants with the following description. And again, if we're going to name patients with pulmonary arterial hypertension, we need to provide more details as diagnosed by, let's say, a pulmonary wedge pressure measurement, as diagnosed by CT, not in this particular example, of course, as diagnosed, let's say, by pathology, fulfilling the following criteria of diagnosis. You might put a reference to the criteria for diagnosis, but you need to be very specific about the population that is going to be, or that should be included in the studies that you are going to include in your review. Then, similarly, you're going to describe the intervention or exposure that you are going to review. So here, if we say the effect of novel therapies as a broad term in the research question, here we need to define, here we need to be specific. Estrogen modifiers, such as blah, 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 blah. And we might name them all. Bone morphogenetic protein modulators, such as tacrolimus, whatever other drugs. We might also need to name them all, as much as we can, of course. So this is where we define the intervention or exposure of the review. Then we also need to define the comparator. Here we say the comparator is going to be either placebo or standard of care, or more probably in such a case it will be standard of care, because we will not, no study will leave patients without treatment. At least they will be taking the standard of care. So the placebo can be in addition to this standard of care. Here it's desirable to describe the standard of care, because variations in the standard of care might have implications on inclusion of the studies in our systematic review. Then in number 22, these are the studies, the types of studies that we are planning to include. Typically, or it is, let's say, easiest to perform a systematic review on RCTs. However, for some questions, you might not find so many RCTs. So you decide to make a systematic review on observational studies or using observational studies. There's a trend also to include both RCTs and observational studies in your systematic review. So you can make a systematic review including experimental studies, RCTs, and non-experimental observational studies. However, be aware, and this is very important, that you never mix them in a meta-analysis. Never mix them in a synthesis. You should always have separate table, or even if you have one table, the table needs to be stratified where you list your RCTs first and then you list evidence from observational studies second. And if you're going to cite some case reports, it needs even to be separate from the RCTs and from the observational studies, because you will not be able even to include your case reports in the meta-analysis. So if you have different types of studies, you need to say this under item 22, but then be aware that you will not mix them in a synthesis. Then number 23, I like it very much because it's reminding us about something called the contest. The context of the studies that are to be included, because sometimes you are very much taken about or taken into the description of the intervention, description of the population, and you forget that you want to include perhaps studies performed only in primary care settings. Okay, perhaps you want to include only studies that are performed in primary healthcare centers, or perhaps you want to include studies performed only in ICUs or in tertiary care hospitals or in developing countries or in developed countries. This is called the context of the study's context. And even if you are reporting a primary study, you sometimes forget about defining or describing the context of the study. Where has this study been carried out? Okay. So with number 24, you're going to here describe the main outcome of the review. And for this, we define two main outcomes: the 6-minute walk test, 6-minute walk test distance, and mortality. So these were two types of outcome measures that we considered our main outcome measures. Notice that one of them is categorical, which is mortality, and one of them is numeric, which is the 6-minute walk distance or time. Okay, or 6-minute walk distance, sorry. So then you need to list additional outcome measures. What's the difference between the main outcome measure and the additional outcome measure? The main outcome measure, this is the one that you base your main result about. If you have a significant result in your main outcome okay, then your main result is significant. For the additional outcome measures, these become less important. However, it is very essential to list all the additional outcome measures that you can think of. Now, where do you get them? By that time, you have already read some of the primary studies under your systematic review. Some of them, you have already read them. These studies, in these studies, you are going to find many outcome measures. You have to take note of these and list them all as additional outcome measures in your protocol. Then you need to describe your data extraction method, how you're going to extract data. Will it be in a Word file created for each separate study, or are you going to select data for all studies in a table, or in an Excel sheet, or some form of spreadsheet? Or are you going to use a certain program? You need to describe here how you will perform data extraction. But the most important point that you need to mention, that data extraction is going to be performed twice independently by two reviewers, and any discrepancies between data extraction results of the two reviewers is going to be resolved by discussion and reaching consensus. They need to agree, okay, at the end of the day. So we need to say also how disagreements are going to be resolved. As I mentioned before, the risk of bias assessment or quality assessment is very important in a systematic review, because when you include low quality studies, you run the risk that the overall effect that you are going to synthesize is going to be a biased effect. So you need to perform quality assessment. And for this assessment, you have tools. And I recommend strongly the tools endorsed by the Cochrane collaboration. You can find them at the Cochrane site. And there is actually a handbook of systematic reviews published by the Cochrane collaboration. And there's a very, very useful website. You need to name the exact tools that you are going to use, and it's better perhaps to mention more than one and to say you're going to use either this or that. And don't forget that there are tools for randomized control trials and there are specific tools for observational studies. Then your strategy about data synthesis. I advise you, if you think there are not too many primary studies, and if you think from your preliminary research that the outcome measures are not very homogeneous, and you expect heterogeneity, especially in the way the outcome is measured. If studies measure highly variable outcomes, one is measuring mortality, one measuring 6 minute walk distance, one measuring, let's say, the hemodynamics, they don't agree, okay, or very few of them agree. I advise you to always say that you will attempt meta-analysis. However, if meta-analysis is not possible, you are going to go the way of narrative synthesis. And in narrative synthesis, perhaps you will do something called counting. How many studies are for the intervention? How many studies are against the intervention? But then you are going to go into more details about the different outcome measures and whether studies agree about the direction and the strength and the magnitude of the effect of the intervention on this outcome measure. Okay, so you need to put some description here. As for the meta-analysis, you still need to describe which program you are going to use. Let's say you are going to use R, you're going to use RevMan from Cochrane. There are many tools now that are available, but you need also to define which methods you are going to use to assess heterogeneity. And for this, perhaps I can provide you can take the text here given as a reference, as a quick reference, and in later sessions I'm going to describe and explain more about heterogeneity and how to quantify it. So for subgroup analyses, you need to say explicitly whether or not you're going to make analyses by subgroup. Sometimes you write it's not applicable, we will not do it, but in such case, you will not do a subgroup analysis. However, I always prefer to say it will be attempted whenever possible to analyze subgroups by, and you suggest the criteria for classifying subgroups. For example, here by disease severity, or by dose of therapy, or by form of therapy, or by type of drug, or by type of patient, or by certain prognostic variables. So you name whatever you can think of, because whatever you write in the protocol and you're not able to do in your analysis, you simply say that we attempted to do this and we could not. Then under number 30, it's talking about the type and the method of the review, and it's giving you many choices. You can choose more than one. Under this, our review was definitely an intervention review. I don't know why they didn't click on this in that version, but I am sure in the final version it was ticked that this is an intervention review with a meta-analysis. At that time, we intended to do a meta-analysis, which we could not, by the way. Narrative synthesis was also ticked. So whatever you think is applicable, you just tick it. Then the area of healthcare. You could classify it as a review about cardiovascular disease. It would classify also as a pulmonary disease. Okay, but I'm not sure. Yes, a respiratory disorder. So it was also classified as a respiratory disorder, as you can see here. Then about the language, are you intending to provide the review in any other language apart from the English language? So we written here it was only going to be provided in English. Then about the country of performing the review, where we put Egypt. Other registration details. Sometimes you have to register in more than one place. Like for example, if your institution is telling you need to register, so you have to tell Prospero that you have registered elsewhere, let's say in your institution or university or whatever. If there is a reference to the published protocol, if this protocol you are building has been published, because sometimes you publish the protocol. This is not a mandatory field, but as you can see, for this, we said no, we do not make this file publicly available and we are not publishing our protocol. Dissemination plan, you do want to publish it? Yes, of course, we wanted to publish it. Then you provide some keywords. These keywords are very important for the search within the Prospero itself. The minute you decided to do a systematic review and before registering on Prospero, perhaps you searched the Prospero to find whether there were similar systematic reviews that are already registered on the Prospero. So you find them because their authors tagged them with certain keywords. These keywords will not appear to the public in that published plan, because Prospero is going to publish your plan on the site. However, they will keep it internal so people can know that there is a systematic review that is ongoing about the so and so subject or about this particular research question. Details of any existing review, if you know that there is an existing review but it's an old one, let's say it was performed 5 years back or it was performed 2 years ago. However, many clinical studies were performed after the publication of the last review, or you need to do it in a better methodological way or focusing on a slightly different question. So you can just let us know if there were similar reviews. Current review status for your first submission, you just put it's an ongoing review. Okay, so this is the status, the default status of any new review, because it's still ongoing. Any additional information that you need to provide, anything that you can think of, and the details of final publication. When you have published your review, you will make an amendment or an update for this register, and you will say, okay, I have already published my review, and this is my report of publication, and you list the citation for the publication, and they are recommending what's called the Vancouver style of referencing. And perhaps in a future session, I'm going to talk again or as well about the types of or forms of reference citations. With this, I end what I need to tell you about Prospero registration, and I wish you the best of luck, and have a nice rest of your day. Bye bye.